My name is Daniel. I was 19 years old when it happened, a first-year student at St. Augustine's College in Nairobi back in 2018. It was one of those proud old schools with arched windows, stone corridors, and walls so damp they seemed to breathe. My parents thought it was a blessing for me to be admitted. They didn't know the school had its own lessons, hidden lessons, lessons that could cost you your life. At first, life was normal. I studied economics, stayed in the old dorms, shared cheap tea with friends at night. We laughed, played cards, and told each other stories about the campus legends. The one everyone whispered about was the haunted curriculum. They said some courses were not written by professors, but by the dead. I laughed the first time I heard it. That was before I opened the syllabus. One evening in February, after a long lecture, my friend Sheila slid a thin folder onto my desk. "Don't read this at night," she said. She had big eyes, always darting around like she could see more than the rest of us. The folder looked ordinary. History of East African Civilizations 2. But when I flipped to the back, there was a page that wasn't printed. It was written by hand in deep red ink, shaky, like the words were struggling to escape. The assignment read, "At midnight, go to the old chapel. Sit in the last pew. Do not look back until the hymn is finished. Hand in proof at dawn." You are watching the Tales of the Savannah. Subscribe and be part of the tribe. Now let's get back to the story. I thought it was a prank. But when I compared my folder with others in the class, they all had that same extra page, same red ink. And when the lecturer came in the next day, he never mentioned it as if it didn't exist. That night, curiosity pulled me to the chapel. The stone steps were wet from rain, my shoes squeaking in the dark. Inside, it smelled of ash and candle wax. I sat in the last pew, heart beating too hard. At first, nothing. Then I heard it. A hymn sung low, many voices though the room was empty. The sound wasn't from the choir loft, but from the walls themselves. The hymn grew louder until I felt the wood tremble beneath me. I broke the rule. I looked back. The chapel was full. Dozens of students in old uniforms, torn and burnt, their faces hollow, their mouths wide in song. Their eyes were black pits. One boy's jaw dangled as if broken, but the hymn still poured out of him. They weren't looking at God, they were looking at me. I screamed and ran out, but the page was gone when I checked later. Only the faint red stains remained, as if the ink had bled into the paper. The next week, Sheila didn't come to class. We thought she was sick, but the professor simply wrote her name off the register without pause, as if she had never been there. Her bed in the dorm was cleared, her belongings gone. No one mentioned her. It was like she had been erased. I decided to stay awake one night, keeping watch, trying to trap whatever this was. I borrowed a camera from the media lab, hid under my blanket, and waited for midnight. At exactly 12, the hymns began outside. Not from the chapel this time, from the dorm hallway. My camera shook in my hands as I peeked out. Figures walked the corridor, students who weren't alive, their heads turned too slowly, their lips still singing. I pointed the camera, praying it would catch something. The screen went black, and when it lit again, I saw not the hallway but my own face, asleep in bed, mouth open in a silent scream. I dropped the camera. The hymn cut off. When I looked again, the corridor was empty. The next morning, my friend Joseph told me, "You look bad, Danny." Sleep. I tried to explain, but he only smiled strangely. Later, when I went to class, Joseph was at the front, not sitting with me, but teaching. He wore the lecturer's robe, chalk in hand. "Lesson 1, he said, and his voice cracked into that same hymn. The class began to sing with him. I ran, but every corridor looped into another, stairs folding on themselves, bookshelves whispering in the library. I realized then, the curriculum wasn't about learning facts. It was about performing rituals, solving puzzles you didn't understand. If you passed, you stayed. If you failed, you joined the hymn. That night, I dreamt of Sheila. She stood in the chapel with the others, her eyes gone. "You shouldn't have looked back," she whispered. Her voice was full of song. I woke with blood in my ears. I tried to leave St. Augustine's, but the gates never opened for me again. Letters to my family vanished before I could post them. The lecturers no longer called my name. And now I know what the curriculum is. It's not teaching us history, it's feeding on us. Every assignment is a doorway. Every missed deadline is a death. I am still here, still pretending to study, though my friends are fewer each day. The hymn follows me in the walls, in my notebooks, even in my breath. If you visit the campus, you might hear us singing. Don't look back, please, don't look back, because I did. And now the lesson will never end. I've carried this secret for years. Tonight I let it out. My name is Ruth. I was 20 years old in 2019 when I started at the University of Cape Coast. My family celebrated like I had already made it. Aunties called, uncles brought bottles of Malta, and my mother cried as she ironed my white blouse. Ruth, she told me, walk with pride, but never forget the ground that carries you. I thought I knew what she meant. I thought it was just about remembering where I came from. Cape Coast is a city by the sea, with salt in the air and history in every stone. St. George's Castle still stands there, a reminder of chains and ships. The university itself looked gentler, with red-roofed halls and green lawns, but it carried its own old bones. And it carried Delta Easy Sorority. Everyone on campus admired them, the women of Delta Easy Sorority. They had their own house, painted cream, with iron gates shaped like vines. They walked in pairs, in matching Kenty jackets, their braids shining, their perfume trailing after them. Professors smiled at them, men stared, women envied, they were untouchable. It was said that if you joined Delta Essi, you never failed. Your grades, your career, your marriage, all would fall into place. The sorority sisters became ministers, judges, wives of presidents, and when they walked, people stepped aside. I wanted that. I was the daughter of a seamstress and a taxi driver. I had no connections, no wealth. I wanted doors to open for me. When I received the invitation slip under my door, my hands shook. A small card, plain black, with a red seal of a woman's face, half hidden by a crescent moon. The words read, "Tonight, midnight." AC Hall I almost didn't go. But something in me, ambition, hunger, foolishness, pushed my feet across campus at midnight. They blindfolded me at the gate. Hands, soft but firm, guided me down stone steps that smelled of seawater. I heard whispers, laughter, a soft chant that made my skin prickle. When the cloth was removed, I was in a candlelit chamber. The walls were carved with hundreds of names, and some so old the edges had eroded. Mary, the president, stood in front. She was tall, beautiful, elegant, and a voice that carried like a bell. She touched my chin. "One rule, Ruth," she said. "Loyalty. No questions." I swore it, and I was in. For weeks, it was like a dream. The sisters took me shopping, helped me with assignments, braided my hair while telling secrets. My grades soared. Professors began to greet me by name. People I barely knew started inviting me to study groups and parties. I was glowing, my mother said on the phone. She thought it was happiness. But there were cracks. Each new moon we gathered beneath the hall. The candles, the carved names, always the carved names. Each time, one girl did not return upstairs. Her bed would be empty, her books gone, her name crossed off the wall in charcoal. I asked once in a whisper, "Where do they go?" Mary's smile was sharp. "They serve, as we all must, in time." I laughed weakly, like it was a joke, but the others didn't laugh with me. I told myself maybe they quit, maybe they transferred schools, but deep inside I knew. One evening, my roommate Miriam woke me, shaking. "Ruth, do you hear it?" I listened. Outside our window, faint, rising with the waves, singing, not loud, not happy, a hum like women underwater, voices stretched thin. "Don't follow it," Miriam whispered. She pulled her blanket over her head and shivered until morning. The next day, she was gone, her name scratched off the wall. I tried to set a trap. I told the sisters I was sick, stayed in bed during the new moon. I pressed my phone to record by the window. All night, I heard nothing but waves. But when I played back the recording, my stomach dropped. It wasn't silence, it was chanting, my own voice chanting with them. The next evening, Mary touched my shoulder in the dining hall. "No absences," she said softly. "Loyalty." Her hand was warm, but her nails pressed deep into my skin. The following moon, they led us deeper than before. The tunnels twisted under the hall, the air damp and heavy. We came into a chamber where the floor was slick, as if the sea itself breathed through the cracks. At the center was a hole, black and endless, rimmed with bones. Mary carried a clay pot. Inside, something scratched and clicked, like claws against stone. She lifted it high. "Obin kire abofran nyame," she chanted. Nobody teaches a child about God. The proverb means that the existence of God, the Creator, is an innate and universally understood concept, evident to children through nature and creation, and doesn't require specific instruction. We repeated after her, voices shaking. The air thickened, the pot tipped. What poured out was shadow, not smoke, not water, but something between. It spread, crawled, then rose into a figure with no eyes, only a mouth grinning wide. The candles bent toward it, flames bowing like they feared. The sisters fell to their knees. My legs locked stiff. The shadow drifted closer. Mary grabbed my arm. "It is hungry," she whispered. "Tonight, you will serve." She pushed me toward the pit. I looked down. Bones, bracelets, shreds of cloth. I felt my throat close. The youngest pledge was beside me, trembling, clutching her rosary. Mary's voice cut sharp. "Choose, Ruth. Them or you." For one horrible second, I thought of shoving her forward. My hand twitched. My fear begged me, but something in me broke. I shoved Mary instead. The room erupted. The shadows screamed, a sound like the ocean ripping itself apart. Candles burst, plunging us into blackness. I ran blind, hands bleeding on stone, until somehow I found the stairs. When I stumbled out, dawn was breaking. My clothes were soaked with seawater. Behind me, the hall was silent. No one mentioned Mary again. Her name was gone from the wall. The sisters smiled at me in class as if nothing had happened, but their eyes held a warning. "Your turn will come." I dropped out a month later. My family thinks I was weak, that I couldn't handle the pressure. They don't know the truth. At night, I still hear the chant. I dream of that shadow grinning, waiting at the edge of the pit, because I never renounced my pledge, and it never renounced me. My name is Chinedu. I was 16 in 2017 when they sent me away. My father said I was too stubborn. My mother cried that I was going astray. I wasn't a criminal, just angry. Fighting in school, skipping church, sneaking out at night. They thought a new place could fix me. So they packed my small bag and drove me to St. Bartholomew Academy for Reform. A tall fence, grey walls, no sign outside except a cross so rusted it looked like it was bleeding. I remember the sound of the gate clanging shut. That sound still follows me in my dreams. The principal, a man named Mr. Adebayo, shook my father's hand too long. "We know how to straighten them," he said, smiling like his teeth were tired. Inside, everything smelled of disinfectant and iron. Dorm beds lined like soldiers, no posters, no colors. Even the trees in the yard looked clipped short, as if they had been punished too. We were about 40 students, all between 14 and 18. They called us difficult, but really we were kids who didn't fit. Some had scars on their arms, some kept their eyes down like beaten dogs, some whispered at night about the homes they missed. The rules were simple: no talking after lights out, no food outside mealtimes, no questions during lesson hour. But the lessons weren't about maths or English. They were about obedience. We sat in rows while teachers drilled phrases into us. "I must bend. I must break. I am not mine." Over and over, until our mouths moved without thought. If you hesitated, the cane found your back. If you resisted, you spent a night in the isolation cell. The first odd detail was the books. Every student got a discipline journal, black cover, red spine. We were told to write confessions in them, what we did wrong that day, what we thought, what we dreamed. If you wrote nothing, the prefects dragged you to the front. If you lied, they said the journal itself would show. I didn't believe it, until one night I peeked at my roommate Hassan's journal. His page was blank. But as I watched, words bled onto the paper, written in his handwriting. I thought of running away tonight. He hadn't touched a pen. The next morning, Hassan was gone. The staff said nothing. His bed was folded, his name erased from the roll. We learned quickly not to ask. By the second week, I realized Saint Bartholomew wasn't fixing us. It was feeding on us. During lesson hour, I sometimes felt my thoughts slipping. Like my anger, my memories were being pulled out thread by thread. Afterwards, I'd sit on my bunk and feel empty, not calm, hollow. "They're harvesting us," whispered Ngozi, a girl with short hair and sharp eyes. "Don't you feel it? They drain us when we repeat those words, like a machine pulling current." We decided to test it. One night, 4 of us, me, Ngozi, a quiet boy called Emeka, and another girl named Ifeoma, stayed awake after lights out. We pretended to sleep, journals under our pillows. At midnight, the air shifted, cold, heavy. I opened my eyes a crack. Figures walked the dorm. Not teachers, not prefects. Shadows in black coats, moving from bed to bed, bending over each student's face. As they leaned close, the journals on the lockers fluttered open, pages turning by themselves. Words appeared in lines, faster than any hand could write. Our dreams, our fears, spilling onto the paper. Emeka gasped too loud. One shadow snapped its head toward us. Its face was a mask of blank paper, eyes like ink stains. It moved fast. We all dove under our covers, holding our breath, journals pressed shut. In the morning, Emeka's bed was empty. The trap had failed. But it proved the truth. They were harvesting us. Not our bodies, our thoughts, our pain. Over the next weeks, more students vanished. Always the ones who fought too hard, or who dreamed too loudly. Those who broke fast were left, docile, like shells. Ngozi whispered a plan. We must burn the journals. It was dangerous. If caught, the cane would be the least of it. But I agreed. I couldn't stand the thought of my own mind leaking onto paper until nothing of me remained. On a Saturday night, when the staff were at chapel, we crept to the courtyard. The air smelled of kerosene from the generator. Ngozi struck a match with shaking hands. We piled our journals, pages fluttering like wings. But as the fire caught, the journals screamed. Not loud, not in air, in our heads. A piercing shriek, every confession, every nightmare spilling at once. My knees buckled. I saw Hassan's face, Emeka's eyes, all the missing ones begging in the flames. The shadows came. They rose out of the ground itself, tall, faceless, ink dripping from their coats. They moved toward us, mouths opening on their paper faces. Pages tore free, swirling in the air, wrapping around us like chains. Ngozi shouted, "Don't stop! Burn them!" She flung her own journal into the fire. The scream doubled. I forced my arms to move, through mine too. The heat seared my face. The pages twisted, blackened. The shadows shrieked as if the fire was eating them. One staggered close, and for the first time I saw its true face. It wasn't paper. It was a student's face, hollow, eyes wide with endless fear, mouth stretched in silence, staring right at me. I stumbled back nearly into the fire. The image burned into my mind. Hassan's jaw, Emeka's cheek, Ifeoma's eyes. The missing weren't missing. They had been remade. We ran. The fire spread to the pile, licking up the journals. The shadows thrashed and tore at themselves, pages flying, turning to ash. The courtyard filled with the smell of burnt ink and burnt hair. By dawn, the journals were gone. The staff said nothing. But the lessons changed. No more chanting, no more journals. They looked at us with hatred and fear. 2 weeks later, the gates opened. Parents came. Students were sent home without explanation. St. Bartholomew shut its doors. I never saw Ngozi again. Now I sit in my mother's house trying to live like a normal person. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still feel it. The tug, like someone trying to draw my thoughts out with invisible string. And sometimes on the wind I smell burnt ink. That's when I know the harvest isn't finished. Some memories refuse to stay buried, no matter how hard I try. My name is Andre. I was 21 in 2022, a computer science student at the University of the West Indies, Mona Campus, Kingston. I came from Spanish Town, from a crowded lane where the nights are full of barking dogs and the mornings smell of fried dumplings and diesel smoke. My mother said, "Andre, you good with machine. Go make something clean out of it. Don't let the streets eat you." At Mona, I felt like I was finally breathing in a bigger world. I spent nights in the lab with the hum of AC and the blue light of monitors. Outside, the tree frogs called and the air smelled of cut grass and rum from students sneaking bottles onto campus. Life was busy, noisy, full of codes and projects. But one night in March, we found the file. It was past midnight. Me, my brethren Malik, and a girl named Shanice. She was the only one of us who really understood networks. We were digging through the university's mainframe, half for practice, half for trouble. We weren't hacking grades or money. We were just curious. The system was old, patched with duct tape code and forgotten firewalls. It felt like opening locked cupboards that nobody touched in years. Malik leaned back in his chair and whistled low. "See this, Dre?" Encrypted subroutine. Not government, not exam records. Look, on the screen was a folder marked with no name, just a date, 1999, November 2nd. When Shanice ran a check, the metadata showed it had been modified every year since, like a living thing. I said, "Maybe it's admin backup." But Shanice shook her head. No admin keep files so deep, and no admin hide key so tight. We should have left it. God knows we should have. Instead, we cracked it. When the code opened, the screen didn't fill with data. It filled with words that weren't words, shapes like broken letters, lines that crawled across the monitor. They rearranged, slow, until they made a sentence. "Who logged in?" Malik laughed too loud. "Somebody old prank file." But the lab lights flickered. The AC whined and cut off. And on every monitor in the row, even the ones shut down, the same question appeared. Who logged in? We pulled the plug on the machines. Still the words stayed, glowing faint, like heat after lightning. That was the first night. The next day, people whispered about glitches. Security cameras freezing and showing shadows where no one stood. Phones ringing with no call, only a voice like static saying names. Shanice swore her smart door locked itself and kept her inside until dawn. We told no one. But we kept digging, because once you start, you want to know. Shanice found fragments in the file, old student records, names of those who died on campus, car crashes, sickness, one boy who drowned in the aqueduct. Their files had been marked retained. Malik joked, "So the university keep the dead on register now?" Shanice whispered, "Maybe the register keep itself." By the second week, it was everywhere. I opened my phone and saw my face in the gallery. Dozens of pictures of me sleeping, taken from above. Malik's laptop whispered in patois, me hungry," even when the speakers were muted. Shanice cried when her smartwatch buzzed and showed her grandmother's funeral hymn, though she had never saved it there. We tried to stay awake together, keeping watch. We sat in the lab with the lights on, windows open, waiting to catch it. At 3 a.m., every monitor flared white. A figure formed, not clear, more like static in the shape of a person, edges glitching in and out. It leaned close to the camera and looked at us, not the screen, at us. Malik swore and threw his chair. Shanice pulled the cord from the wall. Every screen went black. But then the old CRT monitor in the corner, the one not plugged in for years, hummed to life. On the glass, the figure's head tilted, and words scrolled across, jagged, "One of you will stay." We ran. We left everything on. The next morning, Malik didn't come to class. His bed in the hostel was still warm, but his phone was on the desk. Screen burned with faint lines as if words had melted into it. His name disappeared from the course WhatsApp group, like he'd been erased. Shanice said, "It'd take him." I said nothing, because if I said it, it would be real. We tried to delete the file, no use. The more we tried, the more it spread. Phones, tablets, projectors, even the vending machine lit up with the words, "Who logged in?" One night, desperate, Shanice and I went back. The lab was empty, air heavy with ozone. We opened the file again. The figure returned, clearer now. A face half made, like pixels fighting to shape eyes and mouth. It stared. My heart stuttered. "Why us?" Shanice whispered. Words crawled across the screen. "You called." The figure leaned closer, pixels dripping like oil. Its mouth opened wide, too wide, and a scream burst out, not sound but a flood of images. Malik's face, Malik's hands pounding on glass, Malik's eyes glitching, breaking into squares. Shanice screamed. She smashed the monitor with a chair. Sparks flew. The room plunged into darkness. When the emergency lights flicked on, the monitor was cracked, but on every shard of glass the same word pulsed. "Stay." Shanice ran out and never came back. Her family pulled her from school. She will not speak to me. And me. I stayed. I see it now in reflections, in bus windows, in the blank slide before a lecture starts. A shape, glitching, leaning closer. It has my name now. I hear it whisper when I close my laptop. Some nights the cameras on campus swivel and follow me. Some nights the smart locks trap me in my room until dawn. I write code, but I know it isn't mine anymore. The file is still there, buried, waiting. If you log in, it will ask you the question. Who logged in? If you answer, even once, it knows you. And it always keeps one soul. And that, my dear Savannahans, brings us to the end of yet another spine-tingling episode in our Supernatural and Paranormal Encounters series. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. A heartfelt thank you to everyone who shared their stories with us. You may not realize it, but your experiences could be deeply relatable to others. Sometimes, the very story you tell is the one someone else needs to hear, to feel seen, understood, and validated. If your tale was featured today, you've done more than entertain. You've connected us and reminded us that we are not alone in the strange and the unexplained. And now it's your turn, dear listeners. Do you have a chilling story of your own? Maybe it's something you experienced firsthand, or a tale passed down by a friend or family member. If it's the kind of story that makes us pause, look twice, and question every shadow, I'd love to hear it. Send it to the email address on your screen, and your story might just be the one we bring to life in our next episode. Until then, keep the lights on, trust your instincts, and remember, not everything can be explained. Tales, signing out. Want to support the channel and become an even bigger part of our tribe? You can join for as little as the cost of a coffee each month. Your support helps me continue creating the content you love, but of course, just having you here is already more than enough. Thank you for being part of this journey. To those of you who have already joined the tribe, thank you from the bottom of my heart. You are truly the heartbeat of this channel. And as always, thank you for watching our story, and we hope you enjoyed it. What lessons did you draw from this story? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and be part of the tribe. Thank you for watching The Tales of the Savannah. We will see you next time in the Savannah.